first time I came, I was very surprised that I expected for some reason the country is going to be very, very sort of run down, too many years under Soviet occupation, but it looked very well developed. I was quite surprised.
Mm-hmm. Okay, this September, Dalai Lama will come to Riga for this third time.
Yeah.
And what is the aim of his visit?
Well, the first reason is because he's been here 2 times before. There are many Latvians who have always requested His Holiness to visit again. That's the main reason, and there are people who have over the years who have been very supportive of the Tibetan cause, not just general public, but also in the government. Many members of parliament who have been very strong advocate of Tibetan freedom. So for His Holiness to come here and meet them again, that's the main reason.
And probably you and the Dalai Lama expect some support and help from Latvians in this case?
Well, we always, we hope, and we also know that there is a strong support base in Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, on a general public. Now, the governments always change. And also on this trip, we will be meeting with some members of parliament who have been Tibet supporters in the past. And then generally, general public that His Holiness would meet. And we don't have any plans right now of meeting the leaders of the government. No plans right now.
Our president and prime minister, as I know right now, they aren't going to meet you in September. And how do you see the situation of our government?
Well, our position is very clear. From the Dalai Lama's point of view, he does not want to put any leaders in a difficult position by requesting for a meeting. So we have not officially requested for a meeting. But on the other hand, if the president or the prime minister wants to meet with the Dalai Lama while he's visiting Latvia, we'll be very happy to make it possible.
Mm-hmm. Some politicians think that your visits, your incoming visits to some states, Baltics, etc., can worsen these relations with China, for example. Mm-hmm. How do you see the situation, these opinions?
Well, if you look at the global situation right now, China is one of the most important player in the global scene. Economically, country of many, many centuries of civilization, very important country. And the Dalai Lama has always said that China must be brought in to the mainstream of the world community. China should not be isolated. And but at the same time, being a superpower, there is an international norm. China has to play by its rule, which means respect for human rights, respect for media freedom, and respect for freedom of speech, freedom of religion, etc. These things are lacking today in China, not just for Tibetans, but for other minorities and for many Han Chinese. So those should be, the Western democracies should not look away from those responsibilities because of trade with China. With the same token, now the Baltics, for example, you got your independence over 20 years ago. And many people today are still alive who have that experience living under Soviet occupation. And many of them, when they just won the independence, they felt that they must do something in future for countries similar who are under foreign occupation to help them. So we look to Baltics to see that perhaps Baltics could take a lead in the European Union, for example, to make a difference. Because what the Tibetans and the Dalai Lama is asking is not separation from China, not independence. Dalai Lama has made it very clear that we are willing to remain as part of China, but we must be guaranteed genuine autonomy to practice our religion, culture, and way of life.
Can Baltics be some kind of story of success for Tibet? I know, gaining independence, gaining this autonomy and freedom.
Absolutely. First, the reality is such the Baltics don't have that much of a trade going with China. On the other hand, Baltics are the newest members of the European Union. Small countries, yet a very powerful voice. If Baltics got together, Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, and took a lead to show the world that we can make a difference to small countries like Tibet, who is trying very hard through non-violent method to regain its destiny, its dignity back. And I think it's a moral responsibility of the international community. And also I want to mention that today in the world there is so much trouble through violence. And the Dalai Lama is working very hard to convince young people that this century, the 21st century, must be different from 20th century. 21st century must be the century of dialogue and peace. And only young people can change that. So if we want better future for our children and their children, everybody has a responsibility. It's not just the president or the prime minister of Latvia. Every Latvian, every Lithuanian, every Tibetan, every Chinese, every British has a responsibility to do something on their capacity. Because peace and non-violence is not something that the government can legislate into a law and say, okay, now there'll be peace and non-violence. We all have to work for it. So this is where, under the leadership of the Dalai Lama, Tibetans are trying to show the world that it's not necessary to take up the guns when you don't agree with somebody to start shooting. We have brain intelligence, we can talk, we can have dialogue, we can respect each other and have a genuine dialogue for the benefit of both parties, in this case, Han Chinese people and the Tibetan people, because we have to live side by side in future also. We have lived in the past. There's no point, killing each other.
Can you maybe just give a short, story of situation in Tibet right now with the human rights? With this freedom of speech, what is going on right now?
The situation is so bad. I'll give you one example. So far, in the past 2.5 years, 123 Tibetans have poured kerosene over themselves and burned themselves. These are mostly young people. Now just imagine, how can anyone, shooting yourself and jumping off the cliff is one thing, burning yourself, its situation has become that desperate. Yet, how many people know about this? Not too many people know in the world, because they conveniently look other way for the fear of offending China. Now just imagine if 3 people self-immolated, burned themselves in Riga, it'll become international news. Of course in Latvia it'll be big news, but for Tibetan lives, it's worth nothing. Hardly anybody knows. So, that sums up the situation is so bad. Now, when you are capable of pouring kerosene over yourself, drinking kerosene, and lighting a match, you are very capable of taking 300-400 lives. But every Tibetan made a conscious decision that I'm going to burn myself for the cause of Tibet so the world community will wake up. But I'm not going to harm a single Chinese person or Chinese property. That's a lot. 123 people have made that conscious decision. So yet, international community chooses to ignore. Now the question begs, what does it take for the international community to wake up? Are they waiting for one Tibetan to kill 500-600 Chinese and then maybe something will wake up? You see, so it's sad to say that sometimes I feel like international community unknowingly sending a message to the young Tibetans saying, if you really want our attention, you have to do a lot more than kill yourself. You have to kill a lot of people. And that's the kind of world that we live in. It's very sad. Yet we say none of us like terrorism. But terrorism, we have encouraged terrorism. Terrorists are not born terrorists. They become terrorists when you're ignored. So in the situation of Tibet, most of these Tibetans who have self-immolated, they've never known free Tibet, independent Tibet. They were all born and raised under the Chinese occupation. These are the people are fighting back. And it's just a matter of time. Situation could get so bad, and if the Tibetans resort to violence, I think its international community has lost a very important opportunity to show the world that non-violence is very relevant today, and non-violence is important, and peace is important.
But do you see the opportunity that the community will help you in some 10, 20 years, or you don't see this opportunity? I mean,
well,
I think probably could be, but in practice.
You see, it's doable. Right now, Lithuania is the president of the European Union. 6 months. They have the time. If the Lithuanian government really wanted to do something with the help of Latvia, Estonia, if they took a lead and do something in the European Union, not for yourself, but for humanity, for the right reason, other European countries will be very happy to join the initiative led by the Baltics. Otherwise, every country is afraid to take the lead because they say China is going to punish us. So everybody, even though they don't like what's happening to the Tibetans, they're keeping quiet. Now, can you imagine if during Latvian freedom struggle, if all countries did the same, Latvia would not be independent today. Somebody took a lead saying, this is wrong. So we need the same kind of help. And I think it is doable, especially, as I said before, we're not asking for separation from China or independence from China. All we are asking is, give us genuine autonomy. We have a very rich tradition, culture, religion, that we would like to preserve our language, our culture, our religion. And that's not too much to ask. China can be the main country with the defense and foreign trade and foreign affairs and all this. So, what's the big deal? The position that the Dalai Lama has taken. And he has so much respect in the European Union. He has many friends in the government. And that's why I'm saying, each country, they cannot afford to take a stand on Tibet because China is very clever in isolating these countries and punishing them. They've done that to Britain, they've done that to Denmark. They would say, okay, for example, Britain, His Holiness the Dalai Lama met with the British Prime Minister and Deputy Prime Minister last year. Immediately, China cancelled all the British delegation, meeting with the Chinese delegation, a sign of saying, okay, you did this, we're not happy, we're cancelling all this. They do that all the time. So sometimes instead of Britain, they would go to France and give them the preferential treatment. So with the same thing in Baltics also, they could do it. But as I was saying earlier, but Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia right now it is in a very unique position to take a lead. And I think it'll also show the world that small countries can make a difference. You see, small countries can even understand Tibetan situation better. We have a lot of support in the United States, Britain, Germany, all these countries. But as these countries, they don't want to take the lead, the soul, you see. So if the Baltics did that, I have no doubt in my mind, Poland and Denmark, Norway, Sweden, Germany, they'll all join the Baltics. So it is an opportunity, and I think Baltics somehow have, a moral responsibility, because Baltics know what Tibetans are going through much better than many of other Western nations, because Baltics have experienced what it is like living under foreign occupation.
But if Baltics fail in this story, what could be your next steps towards freedom and
Well, you see, this is a very interesting story, because you see, we are very small. Tibet is very small. We were occupied by a nation, Han Chinese, which is 1.3 billion. Tibet might disappear. But the sad thing is, along with Tibet, it sends a very wrong message to the future generations that nonviolence is not relevant anymore. They'll say, look at the Tibetans. They tried. They failed. The Dalai Lama is gone. Tibet is gone. So in future, if there is a conflict, everybody will take up arms and start killing each other. Is that the kind of world do we want for our children? That's the question we all need to ask. So wherever I go, I always say, don't blame the politicians. Politicians cannot bring peace in the world. We have to bring. I have to do it for my children and their children. Generally, what I see is we live in a world today, especially in democracy, which is one of the best systems. Yet, it seems to me that most political leaders, unfortunately, they're not leaders. They follow the public opinion. You see, true leaders will take decisions based on what is right, even if it is not popular with the general public. That's what I call a true leader. The followers are wherever they feel they can get vote. They'll start, even if they don't believe in it, just to please the voters, they will adopt. So in the case of Tibet, for example, which is not the big thing in Latvia or Lithuania, but if the politicians see that many Latvian ordinary citizens truly care about what's happening in Tibet, and then politicians might do something, not because they're interested in Tibet, but they're interested in getting the public vote. With the same token, media is like that also. Media will be more interested in issues that are being talked about in the general public. That's why we live in a celebrity world today. Everything is glitter and glamour and all this because people buy, you see. So here we are trying very hard, and His Holiness has been very successful in terms of promoting peace and nonviolence in the world, especially among young people. And we would like to see a day that young people will look up to and have role models like the Nobel Peace Laureates, people who have made a real difference, like that little Pakistani girl, something like that, who can really, not just for yourself, for others, make a difference in the world. Otherwise, we live in a world today where all our children are growing up, and their role models are models, film stars, rock stars.
What is your role model?
My role model is Dalai Lama, Desmond Tutu, Nelson Mandela, these people who have made a real difference, Aung San Suu Kyi, those kind of people who've really, we're born in this world. Even animals can take care of themselves, right? We are human beings. We have some responsibility to make this world better than when we came in. We have to each one of us make some contribution. So this is where now we've just started something called the Dalai Lama Youth Compassion Award. We're doing one in Riga also. We started in London last year. The whole idea about the Youth Compassion Award is if we could recognize a young person who's done an amazing, compassionate, altruistic work to make a difference in the community, we would like to recognize that young person and encourage this person to do more. And other young people can say, wow, that's fantastic. I'd like to do something like this. So we want to try and help each society bring up more young people who are, into doing work that makes a difference in your community. And that's the primary goal. And His Holiness believes that we think globally, we act locally. So if we can do this in Riga, and we would like to continue this every year. So far we have 5 cities, and then Riga will be 6. And our idea is to increase the number. So slowly, every year we'll add 4 or 5 cities. And perhaps in 5 years' time, we may have 50 cities around the world recognizing 50 young people in their community.
How do you find these people? How are you going to encourage them?
Normally what we do, like in London and Manchester, what we've done is we've gone to a local newspaper, a popular newspaper that has a large readership, especially among young people, and we've asked them. And because this award carries the Dalai Lama's name, many of these newspapers are very interested. So they help us advertise it, saying that there's going to be an award, the Dalai Lama Youth Compassion Award, which is going to be given, and please send nominations to us. So the newspaper will collect all the nominations, and they will appoint 2-3 of their staff. They'll go through all the list, and they'll make a short list of 3. And with the 3, I go as the Dalai Lama's representative, and the editor, we sit down, and from the 3, we select 1. And that makes it easier for us also, because our office does not have the capacity to do all this, So if it is in Riga, we will ask help of Yanis, for example, and try and find a local newspaper in Riga who is willing to do this. And they will be like that. Local newspaper will be co-sponsor of that award. And because we believe that more and more we have to make sure that young people start understanding. And the Dalai Lama always says, the kind of world that you want, you have to work for it. You be the change. Your parents cannot give it to you. Your politicians cannot give it to you. You have to get it. So we want to start working directly with young people. One thing about His Holiness the Dalai Lama, he has met hundreds, and if not thousands, of world leaders in his life. World leaders, there are many types of world leaders. Some are great, like Václav Havel is one of my heroes. But he's not very impressed with many world leaders because they say something but they don't do it, follow it up. So he believes that his time is better spent if he met directly with young people and talked. So these days, most of the time, we arrange talks between the young people and the Dalai Lama.
This 3 or 4 chosen one people, what's special in them? What's so special in their characters or their work or their jobs or what they do? What's important?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, a lot of it, we look at their motivation. Motivation has to be pure, compassionate, altruism, not for fame or anything. Someone who, even if it's a small one, even if it's a little boy or girl, who goes, takes things from home, hot soup, for example, and give to people on the street, sleeping on cold winter nights, any little things, that touches other young people's heart. Those kind of people that we like to see. Compassion can be various degrees, but each one has its own capacity. If you are very rich, perhaps you can feed 1,000 people. If you're not rich, maybe 5 people. But the motivation is important. The rich person's motivation might be his name, fame, publicity. And that other person, no name, fame, publicity, but wants to make a difference. And to us, that person, the young child who feeds 5 persons is more deserving. So we look at qualities like that.
Getting back to Dalai Lama's visit in September, he was in Latvia twice before.
Yeah.
Does he make some notes, maybe some just ideas putting down on paper or whatsoever, about how Latvia changes from 1991 to 2001, and right now, 10 years later, how just he...
Well, His Holiness is very observant. Now, he wouldn't know too much, except perhaps if the streets are better paved, if there are new buildings, roads are wider, something like that. Because it's interesting, last year when we arrived in Stockholm, in Sweden, he noticed that the streets are much dirtier than he was there before. So he told the press, the streets look dirtier. So the reporter said, maybe both you're right. Things like this, he might see a difference. It's very interesting because, like Estonia, he was there 2011. That's the 3rd visit to Estonia. And I was very pleasantly surprised how much love the Estonians have for the Dalai Lama. One Estonian person told me at one time that Estonian people are not very religious. They don't believe. And yet we had a public gathering for the Dalai Lama, and we told the police there might be 400 or 500 people. So it was out Liberty Square in the old Tallinn. When we came down, later police told us over 10,000 people in the hot sunny day. And obviously they're not Buddhists. They're not even Christians, I guess, but they just love the man for what he stands for. Similarly, I find in Poland also he's very loved, and I'm sure it'll be the same in Latvia and Lithuania. As I said before, one of the main reasons he wanted to come is to meet with his old friends, Latvians and Lithuanians, and greetings. He came in 1991, 2001, now 12 years after 2013. And with the same token, perhaps, as I said, if there is any interest on the part of the Latvian president or the prime minister to meet with the Dalai Lama while he's in this country, we will do whatever we can to make it possible. But on the other hand, we can understand if they cannot meet, we totally understand. So we're happy with those who meet with us, and we don't complain if they don't want to meet with us. After Riga, he goes to Lithuania, Vilnius. Again, Vilnius is the same thing, it's the third visit. So again, it's the same agenda. And this year, Lithuania is a little bit, because Lithuania is the president for the EU for the next 6 months. And we feel that perhaps Dalai Lama's visit to Lithuania is a good time, perhaps, to remind that maybe this is the time that perhaps Lithuania can play a very important role with the help of Latvia and Estonia, as I said before, because it's an opportunity. And I don't believe that you have so much at stake in terms of trade with China. In 10 years' time, it may be different. There'll be so much trade with China, and also your politicians would not be the same. Like when I came a few years ago, I remember shaking hands with some deputies in the Baltics, and I even told His Holiness, when I shook their hands, I can tell it's not the hand of a typical politician, the hands of freedom fighters, the hands are rough, you know. So people are memory is very fresh, and they recognize what the Chinese are doing. 10, 20 years now, the politicians would be like, Latvian politicians would be like the politicians in London, you know. Yes.
My last question, if, for example, Baltics really do something for your sake, what Tibet can do for Baltics, for Latvia?
Well, we can pray for the long life of all Latvians and Lithuanians. No, it's the right thing to do, you know. I think Baltics people would be proud. In the world also, world will remember Tibet's long struggle. Finally, the Baltic countries came and did something for Tibet. Now, after speaking with many Baltic people, they all remember how important Iceland was in recognizing their independence. A small country, but the first country. So it'll be in Tibet's, throughout history, Tibetan children's mind, that is, those small countries really came through for Tibet. And I think that's important.